The last thing Sabine did before she carried the cake into the dining room was check her hands for trembling. They were steady. She found that more frightening than the alternative. She had spent 4 days on this torte. 4 days of laminated dough, of salted caramel pulled to the edge of burning, of dark chocolate mousse set at precisely 4 degrees. The cake was beautiful. It was supposed to be. Nobody looks hard at beautiful things. They just eat them. The kitchen of the Corsetti estate in Pacific Heights smelled the way old money always smells. Garlic and wine and something underneath, something mineral, like stone that has never quite dried out. 11 other chefs moved around her and nobody spoke to her directly. She was the dessert girl. She was hired for the evening. She was, as she had been most of her life, invisible. She had spent 3 years learning to be invisible. Before that, she had been many other things. A daughter, a student at Le Cordon Bleu, Paris, a girl who believed that talent was its own protection. Then her brother Laurent had borrowed money he couldn't repay, and the Moreau clan, the Corsican family that ran the south of France with one hand and San Francisco's tenderloin with the other, had decided that debts passed through blood. Laurent was dead at 24. Sabine was 28, and she owed them $200,000 she didn't have. And here she was, carrying a cake with a false bottom into the birthday celebration of the man the Moreaus wanted dead. The torte sat on a white porcelain stand. Under the mousse layer, sealed in a small wax capsule soldered to the support disc, was enough potassium cyanide to stop a large man's heart inside 4 minutes. Sabine knew this because Victor Moreau had explained it to her the way a contractor explains a load-bearing wall. Clinical, bored. She had asked what would happen to the other guests. Victor had smiled. He said Dante Corsetti always ate the first slice alone. He liked to taste before he offered. A habit, Victor said, born from 3 assassination attempts in the last 7 years. She thought, a man who has survived 3 attempts on his life will have a 4th coming for him sooner or later, and I am the 4th. She did not think about Laurent. She could not afford to. The dining room held 20 people. Long table, candles, the low sound of a string quartet someone had installed in the corner. Dante Corsetti sat at the head of the table, and she saw him before he saw her, which gave her 3 seconds to understand what she was dealing with. He was older than she had expected. 44, she knew from what Victor had told her, but he wore it differently than she'd imagined. Not like softness, like refinement. Gray at the temples and at the jaw where the stubble was close cropped. A charcoal suit that fit the way expensive suits fit when they are made for the specific body. He was talking to a woman on his left and listening to a man on his right simultaneously. Tracking 2 conversations the way some people track weather. His hands, resting on the table, were very still. He looked up. Their eyes met across the room. Sabine kept walking. She set the cake at the far end of the serving table. She straightened it. She stepped back. The head waiter came to take it from her, and she stopped him quietly. The client had requested that the chef present it personally. The head waiter looked annoyed. He moved away. Sabine stood with her hands folded and waited. 40 minutes later, when the table had finished its 3rd course, when the lights had been adjusted and the string quartet had shifted to something slower, the head waiter nodded at her. She lifted the stand and carried it to the table. She set it before Dante Corsetti. She slid the serving knife from her apron. He was watching her. Not the cake. Her. "You're the one who made this," he said, not a question. Yes. Her voice was level. She was very good at level. Tell me what's in it. She described it. Dark chocolate, 72%. Salted caramel from Brittany, fleur de sel. Hazelnut praline crémeux. Almond dacquoise. She listed the components the way she had listed them 100 times at the restaurant on Fillmore Street where she worked. The same restaurant the Moreaus owned, where she had been placed 3 years ago and slowly ground down to a tool. When she finished, Dante Corsetti said nothing for 4 seconds. Then he picked up the knife himself. He cut a slice, a generous one. He put it on a plate, put the plate in front of himself, picked up a fork, took a bite. Not a polite bite, a real one. He chewed, he swallowed, he looked at her, and he smiled. It was not the smile of a man who didn't know. Sabine had learned to read people, year by grinding year, and she knew the smile of a man who has just won something. It sat differently on the face, a little too still at the edges. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. She stopped breathing. He drew out a small capped syringe, medical grade. He uncapped it, pressed it against the inside of his forearm, administered it without looking down. Professional, practiced. Then he set it on the table beside the plate and reached into the same pocket again and set a second syringe next to the first. "Sit down, Chef Delacroix," said Dante Corsetti. "We have things to discuss." Before Sabine decides whether to run or sit, a quick word. If you've never heard a story on this channel before, this is the moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because these stories don't get shorter and they don't get quieter from here. What you're about to hear, who sent her, what Dante already knew, and what he discovered about Laurent's death by the end of the first evening. None of it is what you think. Stay with us. She sat down. The rest of the table had gone quiet in stages, the way a room goes quiet when it understands, without being told, that something important is happening at the head of it. Dante said something in Italian to the man on his right, low, 3 words, and the man stood and the rest of the table stood, and within 90 seconds the dining room held 2 people and a birthday cake. Sabine set her hands flat on the table. She did not reach for the second syringe. She waited to see what he would do next. He poured her a glass of wine from the bottle nearest him. He pushed it across the table. He did not pour one for himself. "The capsule was in the support disc," he said. "My lab ran every component that came into this kitchen in the last 48 hours. We found it this morning." He tilted his head at the second syringe. "That one is yours if you want it. The antidote works faster than the poison if it's administered inside 6 minutes. You've been standing in this room for less than 4. Sabine looked at the syringe. "I didn't eat anything." "I know. I watched." The words sat between them. "How long have you known about me?" she asked. "Since Tuesday." He picked up his fork again and took another bite of cake. The mousse, she noted, not the layer underneath. The mousse was clean. He knew exactly what he was eating. The Moreau family has 3 restaurants in this city. One of them has a pastry chef named Sabine Delacroix who trained in Paris and should be running her own kitchen by now, but isn't. I found that interesting. Interesting enough to let me walk in here with it. I needed to know if you'd go through with it. And? You walked in. You set it down. You gave the waiter the speech about presenting it personally. He considered this. You went through with it, up to the last second. And then, you didn't push the blade of the knife deep enough when you cut the slice. Sabine went very still. "The capsule," he said. is triggered by pressure on the base of the disc, sufficient downward force on the blade. You knew this. Victor Moreau would have told you, and you cut shallow. He finished the bite. So, tell me why. She looked at the wine glass. She had not touched it. Because I'm not a murderer, she said. I'm a pastry chef. Those are not mutually exclusive. No, but one is who I am, and one is what they made me into for this evening. She met his eyes. I couldn't do it. I got here and I saw you, and I couldn't do it. Why? She thought about the honest answer for a moment. You were listening to two conversations at once. Nobody does that unless they're actually interested in people. She shook her head at herself. It's a stupid reason. Dante Corsetti looked at her for a long moment. It's the most honest reason I've heard in 10 years, he said. He set down his fork. Tell me about Laurent. Her breath caught. The name in his mouth was unexpected. It was hers and Laurent's, and it had no business being in this room. How do you know about Laurent? I know about the debt. 200,000 euros, transferred in 3 installments to an account the Moreaus control. I know he was found in the Seine in March of last year, ruled accidental drowning. He paused. I don't believe that ruling. Tell me why he borrowed the money. She reached for the wine glass. Her hands were steady again. She didn't know if that was courage or something that had already closed over in her. He was running a small chocolate business, she said. Laurent could temper chocolate the way other people breathe. He had a supplier in Lyon, a roaster, small batch, the kind of operation the specialty market was eating alive. Laurent wanted to buy him out before a bigger company did. He needed capital fast. She set the glass down. He went to the Moreaus because he thought they were investors. They presented themselves as a private equity group. When he signed the contract, he didn't read the penalty clause. What was the clause? Default passes to the borrower's family. Dante was quiet for a moment. And when he couldn't repay? He came to me. I was working in Lyon. I gave him everything I had, 40,000. He went back to negotiate. They took the money and they told him it covered the interest for 1 quarter. She looked at the table. He called me from the bridge. I didn't pick up. I was in service. Her voice stayed level. It had learned over the last year to stay level through anything. Sugar over fire. That was what her first teacher in Paris had called it. The trick of getting caramel past the crisis point without burning it. Hold the heat. Don't stir. Trust the chemistry. The next morning I had a voicemail and a call from the Paris police. The dining room was silent except for the candles. A string quartet somewhere in the house had stopped playing. When did the Moreaus contact you? Dante asked. 2 weeks after the funeral. They said the debt transferred. Victor came himself. She did not try to describe Victor. There was nothing to say about Victor Moreau that was not already obvious from the fact of his existence. He said I could work it off through the restaurant. I thought he meant kitchen work. And then he told you what kind of kitchen work. 6 months ago. He'd been moving me up gradually, front of house, then ordering, then relationships with suppliers. She pressed her hands together under the table. He wanted to know the food world, who trusts who, which distributors don't ask questions, which private events have loose security. She looked at Dante. You are not the first person I've done this for. The silence shifted. Explain that, he said. 2 deliveries before tonight. Special orders, Victor called them. A birthday, a retirement party. I was told they were adulterants, something to make someone sick enough to lose a deal, Victor said. She closed her eyes briefly. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what I actually delivered. I didn't look. Because you didn't want to know. Because knowing would have made me responsible. She opened her eyes. I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone trying to survive inside a system designed to make her complicit a little at a time. He said it without judgment, which was somehow worse than judgment would have been. Judgment would have given her something to push against. Tonight was different. Tonight was different. Why? Because Victor told me what it was. He wanted me to know. He wanted me to carry it in here knowing exactly what I was doing. She breathed out. I think he was done pretending I didn't know. Dante stood. He walked to the sideboard, picked up a decanter, poured 2 glasses of something amber. He set one in front of her. He took the other to his own seat. I want to tell you something, he said, and I need you to stay in your chair when I say it. She waited. Laurent didn't fall from the bridge. He held her eyes. He was put there. I know this because the man who put him there is currently in my employment. Not because I hired him for that purpose, but because he came to me afterward looking for protection from the Moreaus. He told me what happened as part of his bona fides. Dante set the glass down. Laurent went back to Moreau one last time, 3 days before he died, with documentation. He had found proof that the private equity agreement he'd signed was fraudulent under French contract law. The penalty clause was unenforceable in the jurisdiction where the contract was executed. He was going to a lawyer. Victor couldn't allow that. Sabine heard the words. She heard them the way you hear something when the sound arrives before the meaning does. And for 3 full seconds the meaning did not arrive at all. Then it did. Laurent hadn't given up. Laurent hadn't jumped. Laurent had found a way out, and they had taken it from him along with everything else. Her hand, without her noticing, had found the stem of the wine glass. She was holding it very tightly. The man, she said. Her voice was not level. For the first time in a year, it was not level. The one who... He's alive. Dante said it plainly. And I will tell you where he is if you want to know. But not tonight. He looked at her steadily. Tonight I need you to breathe, and I need you to eat something, because you look like you've been running on coffee and adrenaline since Tuesday, and that is not a physiological state in which good decisions get made. He called back into the kitchen. She heard Italian, heard the word mangiare. Within 3 minutes, a plate appeared in front of her. Pasta was something that smelled of lemon and sage. The cook who brought it was a small woman who did not look at either of them and retreated immediately. Sabine looked at the plate. She looked at Dante. Eat, he said. I had the whole kitchen cleared before you arrived. There's nothing here that isn't clean. She ate. The pasta was very good. She hated that it was very good. She wanted to be somewhere she could put her head down and scream, and instead she was sitting in Dante Corsetti's dining room, eating excellent tagliolini and learning that her brother had died fighting. What do you want from me? She asked when the plate was half empty. Information about the Moreaus, their operation here, their suppliers, their network in the restaurant industry, everything you've seen in 3 years. He leaned back. In exchange, your debt disappears. The 200,000, gone. And the man who killed your brother. That situation gets resolved in a manner of your choosing, within certain parameters I'll define. Within certain parameters, she repeated. I'm not handing you a gun and dropping you at his address, but justice and revenge are different shapes, and I can help you find one of them. He watched her. The Moreau family has been moving into my territory for 4 years. They use legitimate businesses as shells. They are very careful and very slow, and they have been more patient than I anticipated. The tone was the same throughout, that unhurried, slightly dry cadence of someone who has thought about something for a long time. I need someone who has been inside those shells. And after, when I've given you what I know? After, you are free. He picked up his glass. You find another kitchen, preferably one far from San Francisco, at least for a while. You make your caramel. You live your life. Sugar over fire. Don't stir. Trust the chemistry. I need to think, she said. You have until morning. He stood. I'll have someone show you to a room. I'm not staying here. You walked into this house tonight with poison in your hands. The Moreaus know you didn't complete the job because Victor will have people watching. You are not safe at your apartment or at the restaurant. He said it the way he said everything, without inflection, without attempt to frighten her, just as a statement of engineering. You are staying here, unless you'd prefer I have you escorted back to Victor Moreau's front door and we skip the rest of this conversation. She looked at him for a long moment. I want to see the documentation about the contract, she said. The fraudulent clause. I want to see the proof Laurent found. I'll have it on your breakfast table. And the man who, his name is Gorin. He's currently in my employ on the docks in Oakland. He is not going anywhere. I want to talk to him. Agreed, Dante nodded. In 48 hours, when I know you're not going to do something irreversible. She nearly said, I am not impulsive. She stopped herself because she was sitting in this room at all because she had carried poison into a birthday party and then not used it for the most impulsive possible reason, which was that the target had been listening to 2 conversations at once, and she found that humanizing. She said nothing. A woman appeared at the doorway, late 40s, dark hair, the controlled demeanor of someone who had worked for Dante Corsetti long enough to have seen everything and been surprised by none of it. She led Sabine up a marble staircase, through a corridor that smelled of cedar and old books, to a room at the back of the house. The room had a window facing the garden. The bed was made with sheets that were probably 600 thread count. On the nightstand, someone had placed a glass of water and a small dish of marzipan fruits. Sabine sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the marzipan and thought, this is either the strangest night of my life or the last one. And at this point, I'm not entirely sure which would be worse. She lay down without undressing. She was asleep in 4 minutes. Downstairs, Dante Corsetti sat alone with the birthday cake and ate another slice, the mousse layer only, carefully separated, and looked out at the San Francisco lights and thought about sugar over fire, about things that could burn or could set, about the particular precision required to get the chemistry right. She slept 10 hours. She had not slept 10 hours since Laurent died. In the morning, the documentation was on the breakfast table, as promised. 17 pages, some in French, some with notarized stamps. She read every word. Laurent's handwriting was in the margins, cramped, fast, the handwriting of someone working quickly. He had found it. The penalty clause referenced a Swiss jurisdiction that had no enforcement agreement with France. It was unenforceable. He had known. He had gone to Victor with the knowledge, and Victor had made a calculation about what was cheaper, a legal dispute or a bridge. Sabine drank her coffee and read it twice, and felt something happen in her chest that was not grief and was not anger and was something more structural. A realignment. like a bone that has been fractured healing at last into its correct position. Dante appeared at 9:30. No jacket this morning. A dark wool sweater, reading glasses pushed up on his head. He poured himself coffee from the pot that was already on the table and sat across from her without ceremony. "Questions?" he said. "1. How did you get this?" "We have people in the Paris police." He said it without apology. The fraudulent contract complaint was filed with a desk officer in the 5th arrondissement 3 months before Laurent's death. It was quietly lost. I found it. "When?" 4 months ago. She looked at him. "Before they sent me here?" "Yes." "Then you knew the Moreaus were going to use me." "I suspected they would use someone from the food side. I didn't know it would be you specifically until Tuesday." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry about Laurent. That's not a phrase I use often. I use it when I mean it." She believed him. She wasn't sure why she believed him. Possibly she was simply too tired not to. "Tell me about the Moreau operation," he said. She told him. She told him for 3 hours. She told him about the restaurant on Fillmore and the 2 others, one in Hayes Valley, one in the Richmond, and the way invoices were routed through a shell company in Nevada. She told him about the distributor who serviced all 3 restaurants and who drove a different truck on alternate Tuesdays. She told him about the private events coordinator who handled catering jobs and who always wanted to know the security arrangements of the venues. She told him about the 2 deliveries she had made and the addresses, which she had memorized because she had been afraid, and when Sabine Delacroix was afraid, she memorized things. Dante's assistant, a thin young man named Marco who took notes in shorthand, filled 4 pages. When she finished, Dante sat back and looked at her differently than he had before. She couldn't quite name the difference, like something had recalibrated. "You have a very precise memory," he said. "I have to. Recipes don't forgive approximations. Neither does testimony." He looked at Marco. Marco closed his notebook and left the room. "This is useful. This is more useful than I expected." He paused. "The 2 addresses you mentioned, the delivery to the retirement party in Nob Hill. The recipient was a man named Castellano. Did anyone tell you his full name?" "No." "Castellano is a federal judge. He has been in contact with the Moreau family for 2 years. We suspected he was compromised, but we didn't know the mechanism." He looked at the table. "If I can prove the delivery came from a Moreau-controlled kitchen, I can use it to put Castellano in a room with someone who will ask him questions he cannot answer comfortably. That's leverage. That's the only currency that works at that level." He stood, refilled his coffee, stood by the window. The morning light came in gray and cool, Pacific Heights in November. There are people who work against organizations like the Moreaus, federal level. I have a relationship with some of them, an arrangement that is mutually beneficial and that I am not going to describe to you in detail. The point is that what you've just given me accelerates something by approximately 8 months. She considered this. "And what happens to the Moreaus in 8 months?" "Their operation here collapses. Victor goes away for a long time. The debt structure he used against your brother becomes evidence of a pattern of fraud."
He turned from the window.
"None of that brings Laurent back."
"No."
"But it ends the system that killed him."
She looked at her hands. Hands that had made thousands of things. Brioche, millefeuille, croissants that shattered correctly, caramel that set at exactly the right temperature. Hands that 3 years ago had been given a different purpose by people who did not care what they were meant for. "I want to talk to Goran," she said. "Today."
"Tomorrow."
"Today, Mr. Corsetti." He regarded her for a moment, That almost smile again. Not warm, not quite, but attentive. Like something that recognized something.
Today,
He agreed.
if you just felt that shift, the moment she said today and he said it back, then you already know what's happening in this story, and you're the kind of listener these stories are made for. If this one is working for you, tap the like, not the generic content was good tap, but the one that says, the part where she read Laurent's handwriting in the margins and felt something structural realign. That hit. Because that is exactly what was meant to hit. The second half of this evening, and the two that follow, are where everything the first evening set up becomes either a trap or a door. Let's find out which. Goran was a large man with a face like a door that had been opened too many times. He worked the Oakland container docks in a supervisory capacity that Dante Corsetti's operation had created for him, which meant that he was, in the technical sense, protected, and also, in every other sense, owned. He knew this. He sat across a table from Sabine in a windowless room in a warehouse off the Embarcadero, and he looked at her the way a man looks at something he has been told is not a weapon, but doesn't quite believe it. Dante sat in a chair against the wall behind Sabine, not at the table, at the wall. Present but removed, the way a lawyer sits behind his client, there if needed, silent unless necessary. "Tell me about Laurent Delacroix," Sabine said. Goran told her. His English was Serbian accented and precise. He told her about the phone call from Victor. He told her about the bridge, Pont de Grenelle, 2 a.m, Laurent already frightened, already knowing what was coming. He told her what Laurent had said in the last minutes. He told her that Laurent had asked him to tell his sister that the contract was fraudulent, that Victor couldn't make it stick, that she owed nothing. Sabine sat very still while Goran talked. Laurent had known, at the end, that she would be next. Laurent had known, and he had tried to leave her a message through the man who was killing him because there was no other messenger available. She thought, "You impossible, brilliant, infuriating person. You found the exit, and you used your last minute trying to hand it to me." She said, "Did he suffer?" Goran paused. He looked at his hands. "It was fast," he said. "The cold water. It is fast." It was not an answer, but she accepted it as one. She stood. She looked at Goran for a long moment. He did not look away, which she gave him credit for. Most people looked away from something they had done. "I'm going to need to think about what I want," she told him. "I'll let you know." She walked past Dante without looking at him and out through the warehouse door into the gray November light. The bay smelled of diesel and salt. A container ship was moving slowly toward the bridge, its hull enormous and rust-red against the flat water. She walked to the edge of the dock and stood there with her hands in her coat pockets and let herself feel all of it at once. She heard Dante come up behind her. He stopped a few feet back. He didn't say anything. He understood, apparently, the difference between a silence that needs filling and one that needs witnessing. After a while, she said, "He tried to tell me at the end. He called. I didn't pick up." "You were in service." "I was making eclairs." The absurdity of it arrived, as it sometimes did, all at once. "I was 40 minutes from the end of service, and I let it go to voicemail because I was making eclairs." "Sabine." He said her name like he'd been saying it for a while, which was strange, because this was, she calculated, only the 3rd time. You couldn't have gotten to Paris in 40 minutes. You couldn't have saved him from Lyon on a Tuesday night. Picking up the call would have given you more pain and the same outcome. I know that. Knowing it and feeling it are different shapes. She turned around. He was standing with his coat collar turned up against the bay wind, looking at her without the calculation she kept expecting to find in his face. He looked, she thought, tired. Not the tiredness of a single evening, but the tiredness of a long time. Like a city that has been rebuilt too many times and still keeps rebuilding. "What happened to your wife?" she asked. He went very still. 1 second. Then, "Who told you?" "Nobody told me anything. You live alone in a house that has a room at the back with a woman's books still on the shelves and a garden that someone planned but nobody is maintaining." He was quiet for a moment. "Her name was Ilaria. 8 years ago. There was a situation with the Bertolucci family, a negotiation that went wrong." He looked at the container ship. "She was not involved in any of it. She was an architect. She designed public libraries." A pause. The Bertoluccis did not care about that distinction. "I'm sorry." She meant it the way he had meant it earlier, not as filler, as precision. "I find that I believe you," he said. They stood on the dock in the November cold and watched the ship move under the bridge. "I'll testify," she said, "if it comes to that. The deliveries, the restaurant network, the contract fraud, whatever you need. It may come to that." "I know," she breathed out. "Laurent would have testified. He tried to file the complaint. He went to the lawyer. He was going to do everything correctly." She glanced sideways. "I am not made of the same stuff he was." "That is the most incorrect thing you have said in 2 days." She looked at him. "You walked into a room with poison and didn't use it," he said. "That requires a particular kind of clarity. Most people under that much pressure choose the easier action." He held her gaze. The easier action was to press the knife down. The wind came off the water, and she put her hands deeper in her pockets. She thought, "I am standing on a dock in Oakland, talking to a man I was supposed to kill yesterday, and we are comparing our dead, and he is telling me I am brave, and I do not know what to do with any of this." "What now?" she said. "Now we go back to the house. I have a call with my lawyer at 3. You have, I assume, things you'd like to do that don't involve talking to me." He turned back toward the warehouse. "There is a kitchen at the back of the house, full equipment. If you need to make something, make something." She followed him back across the dock. "Do you always give assassins access to your kitchen?" "Only the ones who didn't actually assassinate me." He held the warehouse door. "And only the ones who can make caramel." She walked through the door. "You don't know I can make caramel. You ate the mousse." "I tasted the mousse. The base had a caramel layer. The temperature gradient was precise." He let the door close behind them. "I know caramel." "You're a chef?" "I was, before other things." He said it without elaboration, the way people say things that have a very long story attached to them and have learned to leave the attachment off. "My grandmother had a pasticceria in Trastevere. I worked it from the age of 9. She looked at him. This was not information she had expected. She found that she kept not expecting things from him, which was itself unexpected. "What happened to it?" she asked. "It's still there. My cousin runs it." A brief pause. "She makes excellent cannoli. My caramel was better." The small, dry delivery of it made her almost laugh. She did not laugh. It was not quite the day for it. But she felt the possibility of laughter, which was something she had not felt in longer than she could calculate. She made caramel that evening. She found the kitchen fully stocked, as promised. Better than fully stocked, actually. A kind of equipment that you got in kitchens run by people who understood what equipment was for. She made a simple salted caramel tart. Pressed crust, single filling, no flourish. She made it because her hands needed the repetition and her mind needed the specific concentration that cooking required, the kind that left no room for anything else. Dante appeared at the kitchen door at 7. He did not come in. He looked at the tart cooling on the rack. "That smells like the Trastevere kitchen," he said. "It smells like butter and sugar," she said. "Every kitchen smells like butter and sugar." "Not like that." He leaned against the doorframe. "There's a specific moment when the sugar goes past amber into the deep notes. Most people panic and pull it off the heat. My grandmother always said, 'Hold it 2 seconds past afraid.'" Sabine looked at him. "That's the technique," she said. "That's exactly the technique. 2 seconds past afraid." "Yes." She looked at the tart. She looked at him. "Sit down," she said. "I'll cut you a piece." He sat down at the kitchen table. Not the dining room table with its 20 chairs and its birthday candles and its hidden poison, but the small wooden table in the corner of the working kitchen, the kind of table where the staff ate before service. He sat there in his good suit and his reading glasses still pushed up on his head, and she cut him a piece of tart and set it in front of him and sat across with her own. They ate without speaking. The caramel was good. It was, she thought, probably very good. She had held it 2 seconds past afraid, and it had rewarded her. Dante finished his piece. He looked up. "Better than the mousse," he said. "The mousse was for an audience," she said. "This is just food." He looked at her with something in his expression that was not quite any emotion she had a name for. Not warmth exactly. Not attraction exactly, but some kind of recognition. Like a key finding a lock it was made for without knowing it was made for it. "Stay for a while," he said. It was not what he had said at the birthday table, not the formal negotiation. This was different in register. Not as an asset, not as a source. Just... He turned the fork in his hand. "Stay." She thought about the apartment in the Tenderloin that the Moreaus had arranged for her, the small bedroom with the fire escape view, the 3 years of being ground into a shape she hadn't chosen. "I have conditions," she said. "I assumed you would." "I run my own schedule. I am not your employee. I am not under your protection in the way that means I answer to you. If I want to leave, I leave." "Agreed." "I want access to everything you have on the Moreau contract case. All of it. Not the edited version." "Agreed." "And I want to decide what happens to Goran." He was still for a moment. "Within parameters." "Your parameters or mine?" "Mine. Because yours at this moment might put you in a cell." He said it levelly. "When you've had more time, your parameters and mine may align. I find that justice and revenge often move toward each other when given enough distance." She thought about this. She thought about Laurent's handwriting in the margins of the contract pages. She thought about 2 seconds past, afraid. "Give me a month," she said. "I'll tell you what I want at the end of a month." "A month," he agreed. The kitchen was warm. Outside the window, Pacific Heights was dark and quiet and very cold. "One more condition," she said. "Name it." "When this is over, the Moreaus, the testimony, all of it, you tell me the truth about what you want from all this. Not the strategic version, the actual reason." He looked at her for a long moment. The reading glasses were still pushed up on his head. There was a small burn scar at the base of his left thumb that she hadn't noticed before. the kind of scar that came from working a professional kitchen for years and being careless once. "That's a fair condition," he said. "I accept it." She nodded. She stood, took her plate to the sink, began to clean up. He remained at the table. After a moment, he stood too and took his plate to the sink and stood next to her and began to dry the things she washed, which was so ordinary and so unexpected that she almost stopped breathing again for an entirely different reason. She didn't stop. She kept washing. He kept drying. Outside the window, the lights of the bay were very far away and very still. That was the second evening. The third evening was 6 weeks later, and it happened in a federal courthouse on 7th Street. And it was not an evening at all. It was 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday in January. But Sabine thought of it as an evening because by the time she walked out of the building, the sky was already dark and the city lights were on, and it felt like something was ending and something else was beginning, which is the essential quality of evenings. She had testified for 3 hours. The assistant U.S. attorney had been thorough and kind in the way of people who know what they're asking you to do and feel appropriate guilt about it. She had described the restaurant network, the delivery routes, the Castellano connection, the fraudulent contract structure, the mechanism by which the Moreau family converted personal debt into enforced complicity. She described it in the precise, methodical way she had been taught to approach anything. The way you describe a recipe, with the steps in order and the temperatures exact. Victor Moreau was in the room. She knew he was there. She did not look at him. When she finished and stepped down and walked out through the high corridor that smelled of floor wax and anxiety, Dante was waiting on the courthouse steps. Not inside. Outside, in the January cold, his coat collar up and his hands in his pockets. He was looking at the traffic on 7th Street. He heard her come out and turned. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her. The way you look at someone you have been waiting for and are relieved to see intact. She walked down the steps and stopped in front of him. The cold was the particular cold of San Francisco in winter, which is not about temperature so much as about the wind coming in off the water with no obstacles and nowhere else to be. "How was it?" he said. "Exactly as terrible as I expected," she said. "And also, I don't know, something felt like it completed." "You said what you knew." Laurent filed a complaint and they lost it. She looked at the courthouse doors behind her. "I filed mine in front of a federal court reporter. They're going to have a harder time losing that one." "Yes," he said, "they are." He had told her 2 days ago that the U.S. Attorney's Office had enough to move on Victor's financial structure. That Castellano had cooperated once presented with the evidence. The nature of his cooperation, Dante said, was not something he was going to elaborate on. That 3 of the Moreau family's shell operations had already been frozen. That Victor had been offered a plea arrangement and had declined it, which spoke either to his confidence or his arrogance, and Dante thought both in equal measure. She had spent 6 weeks in the Pacific Heights house. Not the first room she'd been given. She'd moved after a week to a smaller room nearer the kitchen, with a window facing the street and enough light in the morning to read by. She had rebuilt her routine in the mornings and spent the afternoons with Dante's lawyers, going through records, identifying documents, occasionally going over things twice when the lawyers needed clarity on how a specific kitchen operation had worked. In the evenings, she had cooked, sometimes alone, sometimes with Dante at the kitchen table, sometimes with Marco and the other household staff, which had led to an ongoing and mostly wordless collaboration with the cook, a Sicilian woman named Rena, that had improved both their recipes and, tentatively, both their moods. She had talked to Dante every day, not always at length, sometimes in passing, sometimes for 2 hours over the kitchen table, with coffee that had gone cold while they talked about the Moreau network, or about Trastevere, or about the specific chemistry of laminated dough, or about Ilaria's libraries, 3 of which Sabine had found online and spent an afternoon looking at on her phone, which were extraordinary. All of them organized around the idea that a library was not a place you came to retrieve information, but a place you came to not know what you were looking for yet. She found this very moving and had said so. Dante had looked at her for a long time when she said it. He had not said anything, but he had looked at her for a long time. She had also talked to Goran twice more. The second time she had gone alone. She had sat across the table from him in the warehouse, and she had told him what she wanted. Not his life, not his suffering. His knowledge. Everything he knew about the Moreau operation in France, the people above Victor, the supply chains, all of it. Written down, signed, notarized, and delivered to the same federal attorney Sabine had just testified in front of. In exchange for which she would tell Dante Corsetti that her parameters had aligned with his, and Goran could continue his current employment on the docks indefinitely. Goran had stared at her for a long time. Then he had said in his careful, precise English, "Your brother. He would have done the same." She had said, "I know. That's why I'm doing it." Now she stood on the courthouse steps in January, and the city lights were on, and Dante was looking at her. "I have a question," she said. "Ask it." "You said you'd tell me the real reason, when this was over." She held his gaze. "It's over enough. What do you actually want?" He was quiet for a moment. The wind moved past them. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened and closed. Someone else's case, someone else's evening. "The Moreaus killed Ilaria," he said. She had not expected that. She had expected something strategic, something about territory or leverage or precedent. Not that. "The Bertoluccis," she said. "You said—" The Bertoluccis pulled the trigger. The Moreau family funded the contract and provided the intelligence on her location. He said it without visible emotion, which she understood now was not indifference, but the kind of containment that takes years to build. "I spent 4 years confirming it. I have been waiting for a moment to dismantle their U.S. operation in a way that cannot be rebuilt." He paused. "What you gave me accelerated that by years." She thought about what he had not said at the beginning, about what he had kept from her. Not maliciously, she thought, but strategically, in the way that people who have been managing information for survival keep some cards until the moment requires them. "You should have told me that at the birthday dinner," she said. "You were a stranger with poison in your hands." "I was also someone who had lost a person to the same family." "Yes." He looked at her. "And I didn't know yet if that was a coincidence or a Moreau calculation." She thought about this. It was reasonable. It was the precise, careful reasoning of a man who had learned not to trust the things that looked like gifts. "And now?" she said. "Now I know it was their calculation, and I know it failed." Something shifted in his expression. Not the recalibration she had seen before, something further along than that. "And I know that you are not a coincidence. Whatever you are not a coincidence." She looked at him on the courthouse steps, in the January cold, with the San Francisco lights behind them and the night coming in off the water. "I've been thinking about opening a kitchen," she said. "A small one. Pastry, maybe some bread. Not the tenderloin. Somewhere with more light." She held his gaze. "I was wondering if you knew a good location in North Beach." He looked at her for a moment. Then, "I own a building on Green Street. Ground floor has been empty for a year. The previous tenant left in good condition, good light in the morning. I'm not taking it for free. I wasn't offering it for free. I was offering it at market rate, which in North Beach is extortionate. Competitive, he said. We can negotiate. We can negotiate, she agreed. He offered his hand, not to shake, to walk. The gesture of someone who had done something formal for too long and was done with the formal version. She took it. His hand was warm in the January cold. She thought, sugar over fire, hold the heat, don't stir. 2 seconds passed afraid, and then you have something that sets into exactly what it was supposed to be all along. They walked down the courthouse steps and into the street and turned north toward North Beach, toward the lights. And neither of them said anything more, because there was, for the moment, nothing left to negotiate. The patisserie on Green Street opened in March. It was small, 6 tables, a counter, a kitchen visible through a glass partition so that people could watch the work, which had been Sabine's idea and which Dante had approved with the comment that transparency was good for business in more than one sense, a joke she filed away for later use. The sign above the door read Delacroix in simple letter forms. Nothing else. A name was enough. On the opening morning, before the first customers came in, she made caramel. She brought it to the crisis point and held it. 2 seconds passed afraid, and pulled it at the exact moment it tipped into the deep notes, the place where it was either ruin or perfection, where the only difference was nerve. It set perfectly. She put the first tart in the window display. Then she unlocked the door. Dante came in at 9. He ordered coffee, black, no sugar, which she had learned to have ready, and sat at the corner table with the newspaper he still read in print, which she found both archaic and characteristically precise. He did not comment on the tart in the window. He did not need to. He looked at it the way her grandmother's kitchen had been looked at by people who understood what they were seeing. Victor Moreau, as of February, was in federal custody awaiting trial. The shell companies had been unwound. The Tenderloin restaurant had closed. Castellano was cooperating. Gorin was still on the docks in Oakland. The Moreau family in France, the wider clan, the ones above Victor, had gone very quiet, which Dante said was not the same as gone, and which she understood now was simply the nature of this world. The waves kept coming, and the work was to stay standing. She could live with that. She had been doing it for 3 years already, and at least now she was doing it in her own kitchen. The door opened at 9:15, and the first customer came in, a woman in her 60s in a yellow coat who looked at the display and said, "Oh, that caramel," in the way that told Sabine everything she needed to know about how the morning would go. At the corner table, Dante turned a page of his newspaper without looking up, but he was smiling. Sabine Delacroix walked into that dining room carrying something that could have ended her, and she chose, in the very last second, for the least strategic reason imaginable, not to use it. And that choice, made not from calculation, but from something closer to recognition, turned out to be the one that gave her everything back. The truth about her brother, the name above her own door, and a corner table always taken by a man who knows his caramel. Here's the question I want to leave in the comments. When Sabine cut shallow with the knife, was that a decision she made consciously, or something her hands knew before her mind caught up? Because that detail has been living in my head since I started writing this one. Cast your vote below. A, she decided in that moment. B, it was reflex and instinct. Or C, she had never actually planned to go through with it. and just didn't know that yet when she walked in. And if you have a favorite moment from this one, the birthday cake and the 2 syringes, the marginal notes in Laurel's handwriting, the caramel tart at the kitchen table, or that last line on the courthouse steps, drop it below. I read every single comment, and the ones that mention specific scenes always make me want to write more scenes exactly like them. If this story found you tonight, the subscribe button is right there, and new stories go up regularly. There are more dark corners to walk into, more impossible bargains, more women who were underestimated by people who should have known better. Come back for those. Until then, hold the heat. 2 seconds past afraid.